it's about to get real sexy because we're going offensive line, and
Going
that's
offensive line.
that's my crush in the draft.
Okay, so I like that that's your crush. Let's talk about, so on the whole, tackles, guards, centers. Let's talk about strengths and weaknesses, like in this draft. Do you think it's a strong tackle class, a strong guard class, a strong center class? Do you think any one of them stands out particularly at the top versus, this group isn't good at the top, but they've got tremendous day two value? What are your thoughts in terms of strengths and weaknesses overall for the offensive line class, or anything that you particularly like have a pin put it on?
I'll hold off on talking about a specific player and a certain technique, but
Come on,
offensive
man. I know exactly
offensive
where you're going.
offensive tackle, I think it's a pretty good group, man. I think there's a chance that we see specifically three guys for sure at offensive tackle, depending on what you label Peter Skoronski. I think he's a tackle, but arm length might push him to guard.
I have him as a tackle as well. I get that he does have short arms. Even if you don't know anything about arm length, when you watch the tape, you can immediately be like, that guy's arms are too short considering he's like 6'4". But his technique is beautiful. His positioning is beautiful. Like every snap, like the leverage he plays with. But yeah, he does have he's the Roger McCreary of tackles this year, apparently, because he's got short arms.
Yeah, no, he's just super consistent. He kind of falls into that category we've seen over the last couple of years of Big Ten guys that they get a lot of love, but they just kind of fall under the radar on draft day. You look at Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern. He was somebody that got that tackle guard conversation a bunch, and he ends up being a really good tackle. You look at Tristan Wirfs from Iowa, ends up going like 14th, 15th overall to Tampa Bay.
Best right tackle in football.
Best right tackle in football. Not saying Peter Skoronski is going to be Tristan Wirfs, right? But you're talking about a plug and play tackle. Like it's a safe pick, probably going to, carve out a decade plus in the NFL if everything goes right for him, whether he's guard or tackle for you, and you're going to get just high upside results, I think. So I like the tackle class, whether it's Broderick Jones from Georgia, Paris Johnson, and Harrison from Oklahoma, who the more and more I watch him, the more and more I think he's a first round
so
lock.
athletic, moves so well.
His feet are so fast, foot speeds really well. He's so good with his weight transfer from his post foot to his set foot and vice versa. The way he's able to just kind of go through his kick slide, punch here, not lunge, but kind of slide his weight, transfer his weight this way, or, again, back and forth. So he's so fluid there. He screams Pittsburgh Steeler at 17 to me. We'll kind of see. I talked to Brandon Thorne about that a little bit, and he was like, yeah, that's a great fit. So we'll kind of see what happens there. But I just think offensive tackle, Matthew Bergeron, Darnell Wright, DeJuan Jones, just so many good offensive tackles here. I do like the interior offensive line group. I think there's easily, probably 5 or 6 guys that go within at least the first 3 rounds by the time we get to the end of the 3rd round. So I think that those are, a good group overall. I just don't know if it's necessarily as deep as that offensive tackle class.
I like to your point, like the top of, if we're talking about offensive line as a whole, I think the top of the tackle class is the best out of anything in this group. When you're looking at, whoever anybody has a tackle one, like I have Skoronski ahead of Paris Johnson, but even as you go down the road, like Skoronski and Johnson and Jones and Harrison, depending on what you think Bergeron is, do you think he's a guard tackle, like whatever, Darnell Wright. I know people who like Morris, the other tackle from Oklahoma, or people who like DeJuan Jones, like even some of the nice reps we saw from Jalen Duncan out of Maryland at the Senior Bowl, like some pieces there. Like I think the tackle class is, from like a top tier perspective, the best of the offensive line here.
Yeah.
If we're talking about like later value, and again, there's still good value, I think, overall for the tackle grouping. Interior wise, I think there's more value like late first, but into the 2nd and the 3rd rounds. Like I think that's where you're looking at like the Cody Mauchs of the world and the Osiris Torrances. I know some people like Steve Avila from TCU.
Yes.
I didn't love his tape. He got great feet. His feet are like really, he moves well on tape. But I have questions in other areas overall for him, like as a prospect, like inconsistent in his pad level. He's a great communicator, but he doesn't necessarily maintain his blocks all the way through, especially in the run. Like he makes contact, but then doesn't maintain and doesn't sustain that block. His defender gets free. He can get wrenched back from time to time. Rough game against Georgia, but then who doesn't have a rough game against the Georgia defensive line because they're Georgia, like, so to each their own. But even there, you got some value there. My favorite part of the interior offensive line is, well, initially was, depending on where John Michael Schmitz goes now, but the day two centers like Schmitz and someone who I really love now, I think you posted about him a couple weeks ago, Luke Whippler. I'm a real fan of like Whippler. I thought he was going to go in the third. Maybe now he's creeped up into like the late second potentially. I like what the centers can be as you start to move through. But no matter how you slice it, I think there's a lot of potential in this offensive line grouping, whether you're looking from a tackle perspective, a guard perspective, a center perspective. And I think this is super important in general, but especially for Bills fans, because this offensive line needs a makeover. You don't know what you have with Spencer Brown at right tackle. Like, is Bates staying at right guard? Is he going to move to left? Is he a guard of the future? Like, what happens with Mitch Morse? I think he's phenomenal, but what happens with that concussion history? You have a hole at left guard right now. Like, Deion Dawkins is a fine left tackle. Does he continue to be that guy when his contract is up in a couple of years? Like, There's all these questions, but this class, this offensive line class, has the potential to, help revamp an offensive line for a team if you hit on multiple guys or take multiple guys. Russ, you've talked about some of the tackles that you've liked. What are some, some more guards or some more centers, or as you start to like work through, who are some just individual players, you like, or it could be more tackles, if you've got more guys you want to mention, but who are some dudes you really like from an offensive line perspective in this class?
Yeah, I'm just going to work my way from the top down here. I got quick notes on the top guys. We all kind of know about those guys. If you don't know, well, here's your chance to kind of get to know about them. But Broderick Jones from Georgia, I think is an offensive tackle. I know some people think he's a guard. I don't see how. He's super athletic, really young. He's only 21. I think he just turned 21, if I remember correctly. I think if he has no issues with his foot speed at the next level, he should be able to play left or right tackle. He's never committed a penalty at Georgia, which is impressive to me.
That's unreal. That is unreal.
It's just so impressive. He's got long arms, athletic. He to me, he's the top tackle. I think there's just so much to work with.
Broderick Jones is your one.
Yes. But it's close with all three of these guys. And I already kind of talked about Skoronski. Again, it's more so, is he a guard or a tackle? Again, I think he's fine. And when I say how close it is, I just kind of go through it. Broderick Jones is 9, Skoronski is 12, and Johnson is 14. We're talking decimals of points of separating these guys, and I got to separate them. So Paris Johnson is the next one. Really good length, athleticism for the position. You're talking 6'6", 315 probably. He's probably going to test really well.
That was Mike. Like, if of those three guys, Paris Johnson's going to probably be the most impressive at the combine, from like when you see him, how athletic he's built, and then what he's going to run and how he's going to move. Like, I think he could have a combine that pushes him up to tackle one or solidifies him as tackle one for people.
Yeah. And I think my biggest, the thing that I just find is a downfall for him is he opens his hips a little bit too much in pass protection, but he's got really good feet. He's a super strong finisher in the run game. Like, the more and more you watch of him, the more and more you'll fall in love. And that's how I've kind of gotten to that point with him. I think Tennessee at 11 is a slam dunk if they can get him after they just let go of Taylor Lewan.
They need so much offensive line help.
Right. But I love the fit for Atlanta for him. I really do. The more and more I look at them, they have Desmond Ridder, they have Drake London. You bring in a Paris Johnson as more than likely a plug and play left tackle for your organization. And I get it. You have, Jake Matthews there, but you bring him in, he might play right tackle for a year or two. We've seen it kind of become a trend across the league. The Buccaneers just did it. Tristan Wirfs is probably going to move to left tackle and become the best left tackle in football because they let Donovan Smith. So I think it's really intriguing with those three guys up at the top. I mentioned Anton Harrison. I think he's a first rounder, especially just in the back end. I think he's also somebody that's going to test really well this week, so keep tabs on him. Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse, kind of rough around the edges, but there's times you'll watch him and you're like, this kind of reminds me of a poor man's Tristan Wirfs, but not really. But he's
had a great week at the Senior Bowl when we saw him up in person.
Yeah, I mean, he's got tremendous grip strength, really fluid lower half, which was surprising for a player of his size. You tend to see those guys play on their heels a little
Mm.
bit or just sloppy footwork. He was kind of collectively and technically sound. I think it's just more so refining that. He's got all the tools, and I think an NFL team is going to really be chomping at the bit for him.
Do you see him long term as a tackle or long term as a guard in the NFL?
I think he's a tackle,
Okay.
but I mean, could he play guard? Is that where maybe? And again, I thought Deion Dawkins was a guard when he came out of Temple.
Fair.
And
How
when
now? How do you think that versatility potential combined with him having a good combine? I think that's somebody who could potentially shoot up boards
yes,
because of the
yes.
versatility. And then if he tests well, it's like, well, we could use him at either or. That's a fun thing.
Yeah, and for me, Bergeron's 51 on my board, which is
Okay.
probably higher than just about anybody. That's how I am. I have my guys, and they're set in stone where they are, and it just is. And Bergeron for me is just a top 50 player pretty
Mhm.
much overall. So I like him. Um, Darnell Wright from Tennessee, he's been a top 25 player for me through this entire process.
I love him.
Um, you love him. Other people love him. Daniel Jeremiah, if you don't believe me, you can look at his big board.
Oh, Jeremiah
He's
likes him too?
He's got him at top
Oh,
25 now, and he wasn't
nice.
in the top 25. And probably the reason why he likes him so much is because Darnell Wright is one of the most physical players in this draft by far, but he's also the most efficient offensive tackle executing a snatch trap technique. He executes it all
Oh,
day
what technique?
long. It's a snatch trap technique. It's a
Hmm,
technique that he actually told me about on
interesting.
the practice field about how he learned how to teach himself about it.
So if somebody came to you and said like, "Hey, snatch trap isn't like a thing I've ever heard of," that person would be incorrect, correct?
It's incorrect. Maybe it's something they never heard of
Could
because,
be.
1987 called and they want,
That's
just to
wild.
run the ball and
Fair
pull
enough.
on trap and stuff like that. But it's a little bit different today. You got to have some
Okay.
pass protection and you've got to be able to do certain things. And
Yeah.
when you're utilizing and understanding how to win with leverage and how to beat defensive linemen with their leverage against them, we call that a snatch trap technique.
Yes, we do.
But yeah, no, Darnell Wright. I mean, it just really the prayer is he's not Cody Ford 2.0. That's all you're hoping for. So we'll
He
kind of
moves.
see.
I think he moves better at his. So for those who don't know, he's a monster of a man, 6'5", 342 pounds, but he moves well with that weight. He's like a grizzly bear. And once
Yeah.
he now he does need some work. He can be rough around the edges, but you want to see how consistent he can be with his hand placement. But if he latches on, he wins. Like if he gets you in those paws, and I'm
Mhm.
saying that on purpose because I think he's like a grizzly bear, it's over. Like
Yeah.
he's got that snatch trap. He's okay on movement. Like, the Bills love to run dart or, those tackle wrap plays. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the best thing for him based on how some of that lateral agility moves, but I do want to see what he looks like at the combine from a movement perspective. Because in person, at the Senior Bowl, like he was huge and he
Yeah.
moved well in individual. He moved well in team. This is also a dude, if you want to kind of test your metal, you go up and you see like, okay, like how can these dudes handle top competition? Go watch Tennessee against Alabama and see what he did against Dallas Turner and Will Anderson and watch him battle. And yeah, he gets got from time to time, but I would say on the whole, on the day, he got the better of Will Anderson, who is one of the few blue chip dudes in this draft. And Dallas Turner is going to be a dude for Bama next year who's coming right up the pike as well. Like Darnell Wright, the tackle from Tennessee, is still like my dream hope for the Buffalo Bills at 27 right now. I think you need that support. You need that competition for Spencer Brown at right tackle. Like, I don't think, the case is over for Spencer Brown. I'm not slamming the door shut on him as he's going into year 3, but Darnell Wright has some upside, and I think he also offers you some of that floor.
Man.
What are you giggling at?
I just hope he's the pick in the first round. And I say that because somebody that was a 27th overall pick doesn't know what that technique is. And I just want it to happen. So every single weekend we can talk about Darnell Wright for the next decade on the
Snatch trap.
Buffalo Bills executing a snatch trap technique. I just
I
would
love to
love
do it.
it.
It would be very poetic. Someone who I really like.
Man, I'm petty.
Yeah, you are a little bit. Radio Russ, Petty Russ. Someone who I really like. I don't think he's at the top of necessarily his class, or of this class. I would be comfortable taking him in round 3. Maybe he creeps up potentially to 2. I really like Andrew Voorhees, guard from USC. Like his awareness, he's the prototypical dude who always has his head on a swivel. Like he's always scanning for immediate threats to pick up. He knows how to adjust on the fly based on how other blocks turn out. He's got good lean one-on-one in pass protection. He's not too far out in front of his feet, maintains leverage, proper hand placement. He recognizes games. He is 6'6". He will come in high into contact in the run game. So consistently winning in the leverage battle may be tough at his size. But then on the flip side of it, watching him torque guys to the ground at 6'6", he does it repeatedly against a variety of defenders. He's good in zone, both in double teams and washing linemen down. He has the ability to reestablish his hands. What's also fun with him in his career, so in 2021, he had 402 snaps at left tackle, and he had 500 at guard. So he has some potential like emergency case, scenario at tackle, but I do think he is a guard. His movement isn't the most ideal. Like, I don't think he's a guy you want pulling all the time in gap scheme. Like, he's not that kind of guy. He's not the Ryan Bates, for Bills fans who are familiar, like with that movement guy, but he's got enough to work in short space and then good with zone. Good grip strength, inconsistent at times with his anchor, but I think there's a lot to like. And if you're looking for, I'm all about value. And I think with guard, I think the Bills address it in free agency potentially, but then if you pair it with somebody, in that third round or maybe even the fourth, depending on how things shake out or how he tests, like, I don't think he's a guy that's going to test great. And I hope he doesn't test great. So that way it knocks him down further. He's somebody who I kept watching other games, not for USC, and I kept always coming back to Voorhees. He was just putting some dude on the ground, like left and right, or he was always having some really good pass set or climbing to the second level and making a play. Like, it just seemed to consistently happen over and over and over again. I feel like he's not getting talked about a lot.
Yeah, no, I posted a video of him, I don't know, probably 2 weeks ago or something like that, and the video blew up, just kind of highlighting stuff from this year and last year, and like he was the first scouting report I wrote this year,
Oh,
and
cool.
he was on my list of interior offensive linemen to talk about because I'm with you. I think he's more of a guard. I think he provides that guard tackle flexibility, that versatility that we love, but I mean, he doesn't have the quickness with his lower half to play tackle.
I don't
And he's
want
just
him on an island like you can be in a tackle situation. Like, I don't want him facing a wide alignment and,
right.
the front is aligned so that way you're sliding from the guard all the way to the tackle and he's one-on-one. Like, I don't want him in that scenario.
Yeah, no. I mean, but you kind of summed him up perfectly. Like, he's a really strong finisher. He puts guys in the dirt. He's got over 3,400 career snaps. One of the older players as far as experience goes in this draft. He is only 24 currently, I believe, but he was born in 1999, so he'll be 25 this year. So that kind of shortens your window somewhat with his career, but we're talking about probably more of like a third, fourth, maybe a fifth round pick. If he's a fifth round pick, that's just because he tested poorly. But I know some people that don't love his tape, and I understand like maybe not loving his tape, but like I don't know how, like, what am I missing that you don't like about his tape?
I feel that way with Steve Avila. I see people who come on and are like, Steve Avila is the best guard in this draft. He's immaculate. And I'm just like, I don't think he's awful, but I had a bunch of things where I was like, ooh, bad rep. Ooh, bad rep. Like, I have more negative notes than I do positive for Avila.
Yeah.
And that's, it's funny that I haven't seen too many negatives. I actually haven't really seen anything on Voorhees. So it's interesting to people, but I can get it though. Like, he's a 6'6" guard who doesn't have the best movement in the world. Like, I could see people knocking him.
Yeah, well, and I think he was somebody that had like a bunch of buzz going into the summer, and then it was like, well, he played tackle for USC for a year. Now he's moving back to guard, so he's gonna really just take off again and get back to his natural spot. And it just kind of like stayed like this, like flatlined a little bit and plateaued. And I think it's just because he is who he is at this point, and I think that's fine. I think you can get a quality starter that maybe he only starts for you for 6 or 7 years, but I mean, that matters, right? Like having that longevity for that long. I mean, that's a second contract. Like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So he's intriguing. I'm really, curious as far as how he tests. Some interior offensive linemen. You've already kind of mentioned a couple of them. John Michael Schmitz, who we both love, Luke Whippler, Steve Avila. Yeah, I like Steve Avila. I think he's a solid all-around guard. I think he's got that plug-and-play ability. I like the way he operates in space as far as his ability to pull, and I
Yes,
think
he's very good movement guard.
yeah, and I think he communicates pretty well when he's getting ready to pick up a blitz, like, hey, and
Mhm.
he's gonna pull because he's pointing that stuff out. And just kind of talking to him at the Senior Bowl, like he kind of like gets it. And I think he's somebody that really like secretly kind of grinds tape. And all these guys do, right? For the most part. But I think when you get into the NFL and you start making that money, you're like, well, the new Call of Duty,
Yeah.
came out. I'm gonna play that. So like I don't know if you're gonna necessarily have to worry with like a guy like that. He just kind of had his head on his shoulders
Mm.
and he carried himself very well. But I can see where you kind of, have your reservations about him, and you're just like, I don't know, maybe not. But the other player that I wanted to get into here was Alex Forsyth from Oregon,
Oh,
and I don't know. He's another center as a day two option. I'm curious how he's going to test because I thought overall he looked pretty good. I thought he had a strong anchor overall. There was definitely times he would like lose ground, but he could like really just anchor and kind of reset his hands and just kind of hold himself there. He's got good snap to step quickness. And when I talked to Jim Nagy back in the fall, he told me that he was their top ranked center.
oh,
And I don't remember if he declined the invite or if it's because he hurt his shoulder he hurt his right shoulder back in November. And I don't know if he had to take time off to get either surgery or get that healed. I don't recall offhand, but he was somebody that I thought he was just super interesting because you look at all offensive linemen, they wear knee pads and knee braces. He
yeah.
doesn't. And I'm he's interesting. And I think as I look at him, I'm like, dude, this guy's going to go to like the Kansas City Chiefs, be a plug and play guard or something for them.
Just crush it.
Last, yeah, he's going to crush it for 7, 8 years.
Take over for Joe Tooney, just be a sick guard for forever.
Exactly. Like he's just, I don't know. He's interesting to me. And I do wonder if a team like Buffalo maybe has some value with, looking at him. I mentioned, my Detroit Lions as a team, but
Mm,
possibly just because they have that West Coast kind of connection with Brad Holmes and Oregon.
mm.
So I don't know. I think Alex Forsyth is pretty interesting.
What about, you know, someone who has been mocked to the Bills a bunch, someone who we liked at the Senior Bowl, Mr. Osiris Torrance, guard from Florida. So I like him, but I posted, and I don't know if you know the clip, but I posted the
Jalen
one,
Carter.
yeah, where he just can't anchor and he tries like 3 times and Carter just drives him back. And I pointed out just because it was like, one, I think Torrance is good, but I didn't name Torrance in the clip. And I was just like, yo, like here's Jalen Carter like walking back a 347-pound guard. And so many people were like, Torrance, joke. Oh, isn't this the guard like mocked to the Bills? And I was like, damn,
Yeah.
everybody coming for like Torrance. But he had a really good Senior Bowl week. And even for his size, I think he moves well. He climbs well to the second level. I'm interested if he stays. So again, he's listed 6'5", 347 pounds. I'm interested to see if he stays at that weight in the NFL or if they kind of trim him down a little bit. But even if he stays, he climbs well to the second level. He's got good awareness and pass protection. He finds work. He recognizes games. He's a people mover, though. Like he adds a physical presence to your offensive line. Like he is that road grader. He's got, I forget how big his hands are, but I was standing behind him in drills and he wears size 4XL gloves. Like he is a terrifying mountain of a man who moves way better than he has any right to. If the Bills took him at 27, I would be fine. I like him as a prospect. Again, I think he increases that physical presence for your offensive line and the way he can function. Like you got a dude who can just move guys out of gaps seemingly at will at times. But what are your thoughts on Mr. Torrance?
Yeah, I like him. I mean, I think he's a first round caliber type player. I could understand if he goes in the first round. It feels like that buzz has kind of died off a little bit. Like it feels like people are starting to realize like, hey, maybe speed, rushers and things like that are really going to give him fits. Guys with, that are blitzing at the NFL level, he's going to struggle, hitting that that 4-eye or something like that, and then having to go in and get that guy that's blitzing right up the A gap, he's going to struggle with that stuff
I
from
was
time
literally
to time.
thinking like A gap or like cross dog blitz, and I was thinking of him like having to like lean one way and come back to the other. And I was like, ooh.
Yeah, it might be a struggle for him, but in the box, like just one-on-one with guys, he's gonna hold his own. And I mean, he's gonna be a plug and play type guy because you can't really wait around on a 345 plus offensive lineman. Like you gotta start putting him in there somehow. You gotta hope he turns into something much more than he was in college. And you have to hope that he even trims some of that weight down. And it's possible. It's very possible he gets down to like 335
Yeah, right.
and just ends up being an absolute stud. Like who was that dude for the Bills? Cordy Glenn, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like just kind of a massive guard that, carves out a role. And I think there's something there for him. And I think Seattle's a great landing spot for him. I would be curious if they took him at like pick 20, if he ends up being there. So we'll kind of see, but he kind of falls just in that category with DeJuan Jones from Ohio State, just big, oversized offensive linemen. And like, it's great that these guys are massive, but not all these massive guys pan out in the NFL. Like when you look at DeJuan Jones, I see the first round buzz, like why people are talking about it, but I on tape, I don't see a first round player. And he opens his hips a ton. He has to utilize his length to like ride these blocks out. And if he can't do that, he's going to lose those reps. So like, I don't know, like I struggle with him. And like you think of Mekhi Becton, like once those guys have to go 100 miles an hour at that size in the NFL, the body just starts to wear down. And I think that's going to be kind of the case for some of these guys. But I like O'Cyrus Torrence, to the original question. I do like O'Cyrus Torrence. I just think, speed rushers are going to give him fits. Blitzes and identifying those blitzes are going to struggle. If he ends up going to, and I think if he goes to a place like Detroit, it's a home run because he's playing next to Penei
Yeah, look
Sewell
who he gets to play with.
and Frank Ragnow. So like it's a perfect landing spot for him there. And I have him mocked there at 18 in my mock draft 1.0. But
convenient for you.
I know, but I don't know. I don't know. We'll see.
It's funny that you mentioned Jones. So I like Torrance. I like Jones, but I have red flags for DeJuan Jones. Yeah. Like, first of all, we're talking about snatch traps. He has a good one. He just chops people's like hands off at the wrist and will just take you down. Also, consistently multiple reps of establishing wrist control and just owning guys easily, like with that length. Again, I mean, he's 6'8", 350 pounds. He's got good hands. He's strong. When he washes down his man, he completely caves in like an entire side of the offensive or line period. Like it's beautiful. His hand placement is fine. Once he gets his hands on you, it's tough for you to get away. But I think he's susceptible to inside moves. I have questions of whether or not he can regularly anchor and if he has the feet and the balance for that. I'm concerned about what he will look like from a mobility standpoint in the NFL. Will mobility be an issue? Like, here's my big thing with him. Like, if you just run a wide alignment and put him on an island and just run at him, I think you can get through him, or just set him up on the outside and get back in on the inside. And I don't know if that's ever going to change. I don't know how much fluidity you can teach him based on his size and his body composition. DeJuan Jones is someone who I'm interested to see at the combine this week because I want to see how he moves, not from a time perspective, but from these drills. I want to see how much sync he has in his hips. Like, how fluid can he move? How does he get around the corners? Like, how does he shuffle? Because all my questions for him are mainly mobility based, which I don't think is like even that novel of a concept or like a knock for him. Again, the dude is 6'8", 350 pounds. Like, he's not going to be the most nimble athlete and the most fleet of foot. Like, dude is huge. But again, to that point, like, okay, like, what happens if you put him on the edge against, or put him on the right tackle against an edge defender who can get around the edge or set you up on the inside? Like, and I'm not even talking about like a stud. I'm talking about like DeJuan Jones versus like Carl Lawson. Like, I think Lawson could go through him or get around him or get on the inside, like, let alone like these premier guys that have the ability to put you in a blender or go through your chest. And so I understand the first round buzz because, again, he's huge and he had a really great first day of the Senior Bowl and then didn't practice the rest of the week. Like, he was like, oh, I nailed it, I'm done.
Yeah.
He was also playing on a really good offensive line, like with Paris Johnson on the other tackle as the bookend spot, and then Whippler on the inside. Like, you got 3 NFL caliber dudes. I don't dislike him, but I have several red flags that I'm concerned about. I don't think DeJuan Jones is this like plug and play tackle day one that
No.
people are labeling him as, or getting the buzz for the first round. Like, I wouldn't take DeJuan Jones in the first round. I think he's got too much. I think his ceiling is there, but I think his floor is questionable. And I think longevity, like, he could be a complete bust. Like, if you told me 2 years from now, DeJuan Jones is out of the NFL, I'd believe it. If you told me he was a top 15 right tackle, I'd be like, oh, okay. I mean, the ceiling was there, but I think he's got like an equal chance to be out of the league just based on the concerns that exist around his frame and his skill set and his traits.
Yeah, that's why I was a little surprised that after one day at the Senior Bowl, he just was like deuces. Like
Because he didn't want to give anybody that nobody on day one tried inside moves on him, and everything was close quarters. So I really feel like he was like, well, I'm not giving him a chance to expose me. I'm done. Like, that's it.
right.
Like,
Which
the buzz is good. I'm out.
yeah, and I get it, but at the end of the day, like I would be stunned if on the opening night of the draft, he's one of the first 31 picks. I would be
I don't see it.
absolutely no, I don't see it. Now, could you tell would if you said, "Hey, the Titans at 42 or the Jets at 44 or Pittsburgh at 50," I could see it. But
Around, yeah, sure. I'm fine.
but after, I don't know. Before that, I don't know. I'm with you. I think there's a lot that needs like work with him, and we don't see those big guys work out. Sure, Orlando Brown. We see a couple here and there.
Yeah.
Maybe he is, but the testing is going to be massive for him because if he comes out and just, I mean, didn't Orlando Brown run like a 5.5 or something
He had one
like
of like
that?
the worst combines like ever.
Combines
He tested terribly.
I'm pulling it up
But
because
he also, and you remember he had like a horrible bench because he's got really long arms, but he was also upfront about it, if I remember correctly. Like, he told people like, oh, I'm going to have a horrible combine. Like, I'm
he
not
ran
made
a
for the combine.
5.68.
There you go. He was terrible. He had a
But
horrible combine.
I think when you watch his tape, you see the football speed
Correct.
and you can see where he excels. I don't see that with DeJuan.
Well, it was
I
similar
don't.
with, I mean, the fall wasn't as drastic. Terrell Suggs set the record for most sacks in a single season and then fell out of the top 10 because I think he ran like a 4.8 40 or 4.7, like something terrible. And he fell to the Ravens. But there was this polished, packaged edge rusher who had moves and strength and could bull rush and had a pass rush plan, but he fell just because he didn't test great, which
Mhm.
you never saw in the like he wasn't the most athletic guy, but he was athletic enough. But Suggs fell, I think, to the middle of the first round when he shouldn't have, just because he didn't set the world on fire with his testing. But yeah, Orlando Brown he nosedived and then he went late because he had such a horrible, horrible combine.